I watched the human light his cigarette inside the council chamber. Inside the council chamber, where atmospheric regulations are enforced by automated turrets that have vaporized ambassadors for lesser offenses, where the air itself is filtered through 17 purification systems, where High Chancellor Vex Thora once had an aide executed for breathing too loudly during a trade negotiation. The human, this Frank Castellano, according to his credentials, took a long drag and blew smoke directly toward the ceiling sensors. Nothing happened. The turrets didn't activate. The alarms stayed silent. The purification systems didn't even flicker. I felt my tertiary heart skip a beat. So, Castellano said, his voice carrying that peculiar human accent from Earth's northern continental region, "You're declaring war. That's what this is about?" High Chancellor Vex Thora's scales rippled with barely contained fury. She was 9 feet tall, descended from a species that had conquered 47 star systems before humans had discovered fire, and she looked like she was about to have an aneurysm. "The Terran Confederacy," she hissed, her voice translator struggling with her rage, "has violated the Kethros Accord, ignored 17 cease and desist orders, and unlawfully occupied the Tertian Belt mining operations. You will surrender these territories immediately, or face the full military might of the Galactic Council." Castellano looked at her. Just looked at her. His eyes were this weird brown color, and there was something in them that made my secondary spine tingle. Not fear exactly, more like boredom. "The mining operations we built," he said slowly, tapping ash onto the pristine crystalline floor that cost more than most planets' GDP, "in unclaimed space." "Those mining operations?" "The space was not unclaimed," Vex Thora snapped. "It fell within the Kethros expansion territory as per the treaty signed 300 cycles ago." "Treaty we weren't part of," Castellano said, "on account of us not being here 300 cycles ago. I was taking notes, as befitted my station as junior observer for the Antarian Diplomatic Corps. My mandibles were clicking nervously, a habit I'd been trying to break since academy. This wasn't how first contact scenarios were supposed to go. I'd studied 73 different species' introduction to the Galactic Council, and not one of them involved cigarettes and property disputes. "Your ignorance of galactic law," Vex Thora said, her voice dropping to that dangerous register that usually preceded orbital bombardment, "does not exempt you from its consequences." Castellano took another drag. "Let me ask you something, Chancellor. You ever actually read the Kethros Accord?" The chamber went silent. You could have heard a photon drop. "I," Vex Thora began, her scales flushing a deep purple that I recognized as mortal offense, "drafted the Kethros Accord." Right, Castellano said, waving his cigarette vaguely. "But did you read it? Because I did." Fascinating document. Real page-turner. Especially Article 47, subsection D, paragraph 12. I pulled up the Accord on my datapad, started scrolling. Article 47 dealt with territorial expansion protocols and... Oh no. "The provision," Vex Thora said coldly, "regarding mineral rights in unclaimed territories." "The provision," Castellano corrected, "regarding mineral rights in territories unclaimed by any signatory species." Emphasis on signatory. He smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "We didn't sign your treaty, Chancellor. Which means, according to your own laws, the Tertian Belt wasn't Kethros expansion territory when we got there, it was just space. And we claimed it. Fair and square." The chamber erupted. 17 different species started shouting in 23 different languages. The translators couldn't keep up. My senior observer, a Veltari named Kesix, was making a Brata's high-pitched keening sound that indicated either extreme stress or a mating call, and I really hoped it was stress. Through it all, Castellano just stood there, smoking his cigarette, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Silence!" Vex Thora roared, and the chamber obeyed. "Your legal sophistry changes nothing, human. The Council has voted. The resolution stands. Surrender the Tertian Belt or face annihilation." Castellano sighed. Actually sighed, like Vex Thora had just asked him to file paperwork instead of threatened his entire species with extinction. "You want to know something funny?" he asked, and I noticed he was looking directly at me now. His eyes found mine across the chamber floor, and I felt pinned like a specimen under analysis. "I'm not a diplomat, I'm a construction site supervisor from New Jersey. I build bridges, tunnels, sometimes sewage systems, when the pay's good. He took a final drag and dropped the cigarette, crushing it under his boot on that priceless floor. But 6 months ago, every single member of Earth's diplomatic corps got recalled. Every single one. Real sudden-like. And the Confederacy needed someone, anyone, who could read contracts and deal with bureaucratic bullshit to handle the council meetings while they were busy with other things. The way he said other things made my tertiary heart stop entirely. So, they sent me. Castellano continued. Guy who argues with union reps and building inspectors for a living. Gave me a 3-hour briefing and a ticket to the nice side of the galaxy. Told me to keep things civil until they sorted out their staffing situation. Vex Thora's scales were shifting through colors I didn't have names for. What are you implying, human? I'm not implying anything, Chancellor. I'm stating a fact. Every trained diplomat Earth has, every single person who actually knows how to do this job properly, got pulled off council duty 6 months ago, and nobody told me why. He spread his hands. But you know what I think? I think they knew this meeting was coming. I think they knew you'd declare war eventually. And I think they wanted someone expendable in this room when you did. The silence that followed wasn't like the others. This one had weight, had teeth. You're saying, Kessex whispered beside me, his voice translator barely functioning, that this is a deliberate provocation? Castellano looked at him. I'm saying that if the Terran Confederacy wanted to avoid war, they wouldn't have sent a guy who builds sewers to negotiate with the most powerful political body in known space. He paused. I'm also saying that my government gave me exactly one job today, and it wasn't to make friends. And what? Vex Thora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Was that job? Castellano reached into his jacket pocket. Every guard in the chamber tensed. Energy weapons hummed to life. Targeting lasers painted his chest in a constellation of red dots. He pulled out another cigarette. To make absolutely sure, he said, lighting it with a small flame that shouldn't have worked in the chamber's controlled atmosphere, that when this war starts, nobody can say we didn't follow proper procedure. The datapad in my hands started buzzing. Emergency alerts, incoming transmissions. I looked down and felt my blood turn to ice water. 17 Terran battle groups had just dropped out of hyperspace, one at each of the Council's primary military installations, one at the Kethros homeworld, one at Vex Thora's personal estate on the moon of Tertius Prime. They'd been traveling for weeks, positioned perfectly, waiting for this exact moment. You see, Chancellor, Castellano said, smoke curling around his words, my bosses aren't stupid. They knew you'd declare war over the belt. The resources there are too valuable, and the Council's too used to getting its way, so they planned accordingly. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every ambassador present. But humans are funny about declarations of war. We have rules, procedures. Things have to be done proper, legal-like, or it doesn't sit right with us. Makes us feel like bullies. He walked toward the chamber's massive viewport, which showed the glittering expanse of the Council's capital shipyards. So they sent me, Frank Castellano, bridge builder extraordinaire, to stand here and follow every rule in your book, to be polite, professional, to give you every chance to back down peacefully. He turned back to face Vex Thora, to make sure that when the history books get written, everyone knows Earth played by the rules. This is madness, someone shouted. I think it was Ambassador Threx, but I couldn't be sure because my vision was tunneling. This is paperwork, Castellano corrected. This is making sure all the forms are filed and all the boxes are checked. This is doing things the right way, even when the right way is slow and stupid and puts a guy like me in front of people like you. He pulled out a data chip. This contains Earth's formal response to your declaration of war. It's 47 pages long. It cites 23 different sections of Council law. It formally contests your territorial claims, requests arbitration, and proposes 6 different peaceful solutions. He set it on the nearest console. It's also completely pointless, because nobody in this room is going to read it, and we both know that. Vex Thora was shaking, actually physically shaking. But here's the thing about humans, Castellano said, his voice softening slightly. We're really good at building things. Bridges, tunnels, sewage systems, weapons platforms, supply chains. And We've had 300 years to study how the Council operates, while you all ignored us like we were pets playing with toys." He smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes, and it was terrifying. "We know where every military installation is. We know your supply routes, your communication networks, your trade dependencies. We know which species are loyal to the Council and which ones are just scared. We know everything about you, Chancellor, and you know almost nothing about us." "Impossible," Vexthora breathed. "Our intelligence networks are designed to catch other species doing things the way you do them," Castellano interrupted. "Turns out, humans do things differently, real differently. We lie better, we hide better, we plan better." He took a drag. "And we build better." My datapad was screaming now. More alerts. The Terran battle groups weren't attacking. They were just sitting there, waiting, positioned at every strategic target in Council space, doing absolutely nothing. "So, here's how this works," Castellano said. "You declared war. That's recorded, witnessed, legal. Now we get to respond. And our response is also legal, also proper, and also completely devastating if you don't immediately withdraw your declaration and recognize our claim to the Tertian belt." "You're bluffing," Vexthora said. But she didn't sound certain. "Maybe," Castellano agreed. "But here's the fun part. You don't know. You can't know. Because while you were writing treaties and managing trade agreements and feeling superior, we were building. And now you get to decide if you want to find out what we built." He walked back toward the chamber entrance. The guards didn't stop him. Nobody moved. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. "Oh, and Chancellor, one more thing. That cigarette I lit when I walked in here, the one that should have triggered every safety system in this chamber?" He grinned. "That was us too. We've been inside your systems for 2 years. Your defenses, your weapons, your automated everything. We could have blown this chamber open to vacuum any time we wanted. But that would have been illegal, improper, not following procedure." He tipped an imaginary hat. "Have a good day, Chancellor. I need to find somewhere I can smoke in peace while you all figure out what you're going to do. And hey, if you decide on war, don't say I didn't warn you. It's all in those 47 pages nobody's going to read." Frank Castellano walked out of the Council chamber, leaving behind 17 species of apex predators who suddenly realized they might not be at the top of the food chain anymore. And me? I just sat there, mandibles clicking uncontrollably, staring at my datapad's emergency alerts, wondering what the hell humanity had been building while the rest of the galaxy wasn't paying attention. The answer, I suspected, was going to be absolutely terrifying. I found Castellano 3 hours later in the station's observation deck, which was technically closed to non-council personnel. He was sitting on a maintenance crate, smoking another cigarette, watching the Terran battle groups through the viewport like they were particularly interesting clouds. "You're not supposed to be here," I said, my translator rendering my clicking into something approximating human speech. He didn't look at me. "Yeah, well, I'm not supposed to do a lot of things." He gestured with his cigarette at the warships. "Beautiful, aren't they? In a terrifying sort of way." I approached slowly, my leg segments making soft tapping sounds on the deck plating. "Why did you tell them everything? About the infiltration, the planning, all of it. You eliminated any advantage of surprise." Now he did look at me, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't expected. Sadness. "Because I'm hoping they're smart enough to back down," he said. "Despite everything I said in there, I don't actually want a war. Wars are expensive, messy. People die, and most of them are just trying to do their jobs, like you and me." He took a drag. "But if they're stupid enough to push this, then they need to know exactly what they're getting into. Fair warning and all that." "That's very human," I said, settling onto my lower segments, beside his crate. "To threaten total annihilation while calling it fairness." He laughed, and it was a genuine sound. "Yeah, I guess it is. What's your name, friend? I've seen you in the gallery, always taking notes." "Junior Observer Crixtel of the Antarian Diplomatic Corps," I said. "But everyone calls me Crix." "Frank," he said, offering his hand. I extended a manipulator appendage, and we shook in the human custom. His grip was warm, soft compared to the species I usually dealt with. Fragile, even. "You drink, Crix?" My species processes liquid sustenance, yes. He pulled a flask from his jacket. I mean alcohol. This is whiskey, from Earth. Tennessee, specifically, which is apparently very important to the people who make it. I accepted the flask and took a cautious sip. It burned through my filtration membranes like plasma fire. This is poison. Little bit, yeah, Frank agreed, taking it back and drinking deeply. But it makes the universe feel smaller, more manageable. He looked out at the warships again. I'm scared, Crix. Absolutely terrified. And this helps. The admission shocked me more than anything that had happened in the council chamber. You're scared? You stood in front of the High Chancellor and threatened the entire Galactic Council. Because my government told me to, he said quietly. Because someone had to, and I was the only one they could spare. But that doesn't mean I'm not scared. He offered me the flask again. You know what the really messed up thing is? They chose me specifically because I'm nobody. Some guy who builds infrastructure. If the council decided to just shoot the messenger, literally, it wouldn't be a huge loss. A real diplomat would have been too valuable to risk. I took another sip, smaller this time. The burning was almost pleasant now, but you delivered the message anyway. Had to. That's the job. He smiled slightly. My daughter, she's 16, wants to be a xenobiologist, studies alien life forms, you know? She thinks meeting other species is the most beautiful thing humans ever did, and I'm sitting here, maybe about to start a war that could kill millions of kids just like her on both sides. Then why do it? Because the alternative is letting the council push us around forever, Frank said. Earth tried peaceful integration. We followed the rules, paid the fees, respected the territories. And you know what happened? We got treated like children. Our claims were ignored. Our representatives were laughed at. Our sovereignty was considered optional. His voice hardened. At some point, you have to stand up, even if standing up is terrifying. My datapad buzzed. I looked down and felt my filtering system clench. The council is reconvening in 1 hour. Emergency session. They're calling you back. Frank closed his eyes. Here we go. What do you think they'll choose? Honestly? I think they'll choose war. The council's used to species that roll over. They can't imagine we're serious. He stood up, stretching his back with a series of pops that sounded alarming. But I hope I'm wrong. We walked back to the council chamber together, neither of us speaking. The corridors were packed with diplomats and military advisors, all moving with urgent purpose. I noticed several species I'd never seen show fear before now, looking openly terrified. The humans had done this. This small young species that barely controlled 24 star systems had brought the Galactic Council to the edge of panic with nothing but planning and timing. It was magnificent and horrible in equal measure. The council chamber had transformed. Where before it had been a place of dignified negotiation, now it looked like a war room. Holographic displays showed the positions of the Terran battle groups. Tactical assessments scrolled across secondary screens. Military commanders stood beside diplomats, whispering urgently. Vex Thora sat on her throne, scales a dull grey that indicated exhaustion or stress. She looked like she'd aged a decade in 3 hours. Frank walked to the center of the chamber floor. He didn't light a cigarette this time. The council, Vex Thora said, her voice carefully neutral, has reviewed Earth's formal response. All 47 pages. Frank raised an eyebrow. Quick readers. We had help from our legal teams, she said dryly. Your arguments regarding the Kethros Accord are technically sound, frustratingly so. My lawyers would be thrilled to hear that. Vex Thora's scales rippled with something that might have been amusement. However, the issue remains that your battle groups are currently positioned at strategic targets throughout Council space. This is an act of aggression. It's a deterrent, Frank corrected. An act of aggression would be actually attacking. We haven't fired a single shot. Yet, someone called from the gallery. Ambassador Threx, if my recognition was correct. Yet, Frank agreed. And, hopefully never. That's kind of the whole point. Vex Thora leaned forward. Tell me something, Castellano. Do you actually have authorization to negotiate? Or are you truly just a construction worker your government threw into the fire? Frank was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, harder. I have authorization to deliver Earth's position. Whether I can negotiate depends on whether there's anything to negotiate about. Meaning, Meaning Earth's position is non-negotiable. The Tertian belt is ours. We claimed it legally, we developed it legally, and we're keeping it legally. The only thing to negotiate is whether the Council accepts that peacefully or not. That's not negotiation, Vex Thora said. That's an ultimatum. Yeah, Frank said softly. Yeah, it is. And I'm sorry about that, I really am. But my government was very clear. No more being pushed around. No more being treated like we don't matter. Vex Thora stood, her full height impressive even, in the massive chamber. You understand what you're asking? You're demanding that the Galactic Council, which has existed for over 12,000 cycles, bow to the will of a species that's been in space for barely 3 centuries. I'm asking the Council to follow its own laws, Frank said. The same laws you use to control everyone else. If those laws say the belt is ours, then it's ours. That's how laws work. And the battle groups? Stay exactly where they are until the Council formally recognizes Earth's claim and withdraws the declaration of war, Frank said. After that, they go home. Everyone goes home. We keep building our mining operations, you keep running the Council, and nobody has to die over a legal technicality. And if we refuse? Frank looked tired. So tired. Then I guess we find out if humanity really is as scary as I made us sound. The chamber exploded into argument again. I watched species that had been allies for millennia turn on each other. Some wanted war, to put the upstart humans in their place. Others wanted peace, unwilling to risk their populations over territorial pride. Through it all, Frank just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. Finally, after what felt like hours, Vex Thora raised her hand. Silence fell. The Council, she said slowly, requires time to deliberate. This session is adjourned for 6 standard hours. Castellano, you will remain on the station. Wasn't planning on going anywhere, Frank said. As the chamber emptied, I approached him again. That went better than I expected. They're going to agree, Frank said, surprising me. They'll bluster and argue and make it seem like a huge concession, but they'll agree. How can you be sure? He looked at me with those strange brown eyes. Because Vex Thora is smart. She's been running the Council for 40 years, and she didn't get there by being stupid. She knows that if she pushes this to war, even if the Council wins, they lose. Their reputation as the ultimate authority gets shattered. Every species they've pushed around starts wondering if they can do the same thing. So this was always about reputation? Everything's always about reputation, Frank said. We didn't position those battle groups to actually attack. We positioned them to prove we could. To show the galaxy that humans aren't harmless anymore. That we've been paying attention, learning, building. He started walking toward the exit. Come on, let's get something to eat. I'm starving, and I hear the station has a decent noodle place on level 47. You're remarkably calm for someone who might have just started an interstellar war. I'm not calm, Frank, T said. I'm just really good at pretending. It's a construction site thing. If the foreman panics, everyone panics. So you learn to look calm even when everything's on fire. The noodle place was called the Spiral Galaxy, and it was packed with diplomats trying to eat away their stress. We found a corner booth, and Frank ordered something called ramen, in a dialect I didn't recognize. I ordered a nutrient suspension that the waiter promised was Antarian compatible. Can I ask you something? Frank said as we waited for our food. Why are you being so nice to me? I just threatened your entire civilization. I'm a junior observer, I said. My entire job is to watch and learn. And you're the most interesting thing that's happened in my career. I paused. Also, I think you're right. The Council has gotten arrogant. We needed someone to challenge us, even if that someone is human. Especially if that someone is human, I said. You're young, naive in some ways. But you're also innovative, unpredictable. The galaxy needs that. The food arrived. Frank's ramen smelled strange but not unpleasant. He ate with wooden sticks, somehow managing to manipulate them with just 2 fingers and a thumb. Humans had such bizarre anatomy. You know what the funny thing is? Frank said between bites. I really do just build bridges. Everything I said in there about Earth's planning and preparation, I barely understand half of it. They gave me talking points and told me to sound confident. You succeeded. Yeah, well, fake it till you make it, right? He smiled. But the battle groups are real. The infiltration is real. Earth really has been preparing for this for years. I'm just the guy they picked to deliver the message because I'm good at dealing with bureaucratic nonsense. You're more than that, I said. You made the High Chancellor back down. She hasn't backed down yet, but she did. 6 hours later, we were back in the council chamber. Vexthora stood before the assembled representatives, scales a neutral grey-green that indicated reluctant acceptance. The Galactic Council, she announced, has reviewed the legal standing of Earth's territorial claim to the Tertian Belt. After extensive deliberation, we find that the claim is valid under Articles 47 through 51 of the Kethros Accord. Frank didn't move, didn't react, just listened. Furthermore, Vexthora continued, her voice tight, the Council withdraws its declaration of war and formally recognizes the Terran Confederacy's sovereignty over the disputed territories. We expect that Earth will, in turn, withdraw its battle groups from Council space. Immediately, Frank said. They're already receiving the order. And just like that, it was over. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions, relief, anger, confusion. But it was over. I found Frank afterward in that same observation deck. The Terran battle groups were pulling back, vanishing into hyperspace one by one. He was smoking again, watching them go. You did it, I said. We did it, he corrected. Earth did it. I was just the messenger. You were more than that, he shrugged. Maybe. But tomorrow I go back to being Frank Castellano, construction supervisor. Back to building bridges and arguing with union reps about overtime pay. After this, they'll probably promote you, he laughed. God, I hope not. I'm terrible at politics. He took a final drag and crushed the cigarette. You know what I want? I want to go home, see my daughter, tell her about the aliens I met, the ones who were smart enough to choose peace. Will you tell her about me? Definitely, Frank said. I'll tell her about Crix, the junior observer who was kind to a scared construction worker when he needed a friend. He offered his hand again, and I shook it. Take care of yourself, Crix. And if the Council ever threatens war again, maybe remind them that sometimes the scary thing about humans isn't our weapons or our tactics. What is it then? He smiled. It's that we really, genuinely, would rather build bridges than burn them. But if you make us burn them? He looked out at the now empty space where the battle groups had been. We're surprisingly good at that too. Frank Castellano left the station the next day. I never saw him again, but I think about him often. About the human who walked into the council chamber, lit a cigarette, and changed the galaxy's balance of power with nothing but confidence and careful planning. The construction worker who became a legend without ever wanting to be one. The council is different now, more careful, more respectful of humanity's place in galactic affairs. And every time someone suggests pushing the humans around, some variation of the story gets told. About Frank and his cigarettes and his whiskey. About the day humanity proved they were done being ignored. I eventually made senior observer, then ambassador. And in every negotiation, every tense moment, every time someone tries to use force instead of law, I remember what Frank taught me. Sometimes the scariest thing in the universe isn't the weapon you're holding. It's the bridge you're willing to burn. And humans? They build the best bridges in the galaxy. They'd really rather not burn them. But if you give them no choice, well, let's just say I'm glad the Council was smart enough to back down, because I've seen humanity's construction work, and I really, really don't want to see what they build for war.